Hey there guys, welcome back to Planet Botanic. This is episode 5, and this is what we did last time. You can see the water garden here. Thank you all for the awesome comments. It's just been awesome to read all of your feedback and stuff like that. I really enjoy this garden. I think it's pretty damn awesome, and I think it turned out really well. So where are we going to go next? Well, let's take a look back here. And we can see that, we still have the central garden here. I've got this area here, which is going to be the road that leads up. And the road leads up to this little spot here, and then it's going to start making its way down. And that is going to be the site of the desert garden. So in the real Huntington Library, the desert garden is one of the largest gardens, and it's way down here. And it stretches pretty much all the way up like that, so it's like a big lung. In my garden, I'm going to have it a little higher up on the cliffs here, and I think that'll look really cool. But for today, we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on this little pocket garden that I've got here. You can see I've got all this space, and it needs to get cleaned up. So the best way I know how to do that is to do a little trail system or something like that. And in this case, I'm going to pull again from the Huntington. It tends to have these, I don't know if exactly they're old grape arbors or what, but as you walk down from the estate to the lower road, and my version actually goes opposite, so in the real Huntington, the road is much lower than the estate, and you make your way down a set of staircases. In mine, you are actually walking up to get to the road, but that's neither here nor there. There's always going to be a little bit of changes. The challenge here is going to be to get a path that goes up in a fairly natural way. I need to work out the slope a little bit so that it's not so bumpy. And then the same on this side. This has to be cleaned up so that this is a ramp and not a path, because I want to make sure that all of this is accessible to Americans with disabilities. All right, you can see that I've got the road in there well installed. It goes a pretty shallow slope, still traversable by people, still traversable by car. It's not so varied that it would be bumpy or unsafe to drive. And that's going to be the main road that pretty much exists around this entire botanical garden. And then in here, I've got some new pathing installed. And you can see now that when you exit from the estate, you go across the lawn, up a set of stairs. I know the stairs, there's not going to be a ramp here, there's going to be a ramp somewhere else. So don't be writing your comments yet. I'm going to have a ramp that goes on this side. It's going to be a modern addition to the estate. But for people that can walk up these stairs, you'll walk up these stairs. And yeah, you can kind of see it's a pretty boring spot. So this is the perfect time to put in what I call pocket gardens, which are smaller gardens. They're not big things that you would want to necessarily come to this garden for, but when you discover them, they actually enrich your experience quite a bit, because they are unexpected, and they usually have a sense of discovery or adventure or something like that. You can see the slope is very gentle coming up. It's made of this bark material or compressed forest duff. I don't even know what it's called exactly. But it moves its way up here, and then you're in the water garden. So it's a bit of a transition between the estate and the water garden. And you can see that you have a very old style here, and you have a very new style here. And so something has to be in the middle. And so that's what this is going to be. The garden winds its way through this little kind of forested area. There's going to be a lot of ponderosas, a lot of old trees that this garden is just kind of winding around. In the timeline of this garden, this is actually going to be a much older garden. It's going to be still taken care of in certain parts, but it's going to look wild, and it's going to look like it's just the undergrowth of the trees and stuff like that. And we'll do that by using certain plants and certain plant palettes. It'll be really cool. And then there's a trail for you to discover, which is going to be underneath some woven arbor, which is going to look really awesome. And then there is this other trail that you can choose, and this is going to go out into the forest a little bit. You know, it's a divergent path, so you can choose to go whichever way you want. You can go underneath the arbors if you want a certain, if you want to see more, or if you want to get closer to things, then you can take the gravel path. If you want to know how to do these 2 meter and 3 meter paths, these really small paths, you can take a look at one of my garden rescue videos. I think it's the first one that I did, and that goes over pathing pretty effectively. So I think this is a really strong start, and it's time to start adding some of the arbor in. Here you can start to see my idea a little bit better. I've got the arbor posts in and some of the woven arbor in already. And it's really just a meandering path beneath some of these trees. You can see I've got some ponderosa in each of the 4 pockets here. And these 4 pocket gardens are going to be the ones that are a little bit more sunny, because they just happen to they catch the sun a little bit better. They're going to be wildflowers in there, with the rest of the garden being a little bit more shrubby and grassy and stuff like that. I think it looks really awesome. I'm really happy with the way it came out. And if you want to know how to do something like this without going crazy, break it up into pieces. So what I did is I broke up my post into a single piece, and then I built a section of the arbor as a single piece. And I did a curved section, and I did a straight section. And by doing that, and then just layering them together as different buildings, this was able to come together fairly quickly without me pulling my hair out. And it still looks, pretty good. It's not exact. If you really look at the details, you can see that posts are just kind of hanging next to each other, whereas they would have technically been woven, or there would have been some sort of tie material. But don't look at that, because that just ruins the experience for you. And then each end of the garden has one of these arbors, and that is going to kind of signify the beginning of the garden and the end of the garden. You can see it's a fairly short trail. You only take about 5 minutes to walk, probably a normal walking pace, or about 10 minutes if you were, kind of strolling and stopping and looking and taking pictures and stuff like that. And then I thought this was a really cool detail as well. So to make it feel a little bit older and to make it feel a little bit more fragile, like it's been here for a while, here's a section that's actually broken off. And you can see it's just being held on by the nails in there. There's not really much else that is keeping that up. Originally, I had thought that I was going to try and make the Ponderosa Trail come all the way around and connect to the water garden, but the more that I thought about it, the more it seemed like a better idea to kind of stop your traffic, and you can decide to go this way, and so this will require a different kind of pocket garden. And then if you want to get back to the main path, you can take this trail. So loving the way that this is turning out, and if you look up above, you can see that there's a little bit more work, and there's this giant blue tarped thing. And that is because I'm not going to reveal that until episode 6. This is going to be the desert garden, and you may have seen a little teaser if you follow my community posts in YouTube. Yeah, that's what that is right there. That's that big mosaic floor that has been built by Remnant. Awesome builder. If you have not subscribed to him, you absolutely need to. He is doing an awesome California-inspired, more like San Diego-inspired zoo. And he's just going to kill it. But I have another guest coming in as well, Duct Tape Forum. He has been doing a desert garden himself. And so I thought it would be a perfect opportunity for him to come in and work on my desert garden. You can see that it's got a lot of different levels, and it has a road that weaves its way through. And so on this side, it'll be the desert garden. On this side, it'll be, very simple, whatever is native to the estate. So this won't necessarily be a garden. This is definitely going to be more of a naturalized type area, though we could certainly put a trail in there, and that might be really cool, actually, to have a little trail that goes down this way in a little bit more of a naturalized state. And then it would come down to this side where the majority of the structures are for the whole complex or the whole campus. So it'll have the estate, it'll have the library, and it'll have the archives, because I do want to follow that sort of idea that the Huntington follows. All right, we're a little bit further along, and you can see that this kind of looks like the end of, the video. This looks like the end of the garden. It's all nicely done up here. You can see that everything is filled in quite nicely. This is that pocket garden that I was talking about. And so the idea that I came up with is that this is a sponsored garden. Sponsored by a plant manufacturer. They're not really breeder either. Plant distributor? Proven winners. They tend to breed their own plant types and then distribute them out for just home gardens and stuff like that. They have a line called Indestructibles, and so I thought this would be a great place to have an example garden that kind of shows off how you can use 5 different plants that still produce a really satisfying garden here. You can see it's very unified. There's not a whole lot going on, but because of that strict unity, it's quite balanced. It feels like it should. And it does the job of kind of concealing off the water garden. You can slowly see the structures above, but you don't really see it until you're way up there and actually in the water garden. The other nice thing that this does is it creates a little bit of a living hedge between the path and the estate. So if you were to be coming down or working your way towards the estate, you'd have a frame of reference as you're walking through the garden. That can sometimes be very difficult in some of these old gardens as they get a little bit more overgrown. You can start to lose the landmarks that people want to see. And in this case, people definitely want to go down to see the estate and to see the major migration garden there. So how is this achieved? Well, I've got a little demonstration for you. I bet you weren't expecting this. So, what I'm going to talk about is something that I see a lot of people doing, especially builders that have been doing this for a while, that don't quite understand the concepts of landscape architecture or in general the concepts of design. And that isn't meant to be a dig or a shade or anything like that. It's not common knowledge if you haven't really grown up with it. So this is what a lot of people do. This is what I call the pointillism garden. Pointillism is an art style that puts tiny little dots everywhere on the canvas, and then when you step back, you can actually see the whole effect once the dots are actually mixed in optically with your eyes. That's probably not the best way to put it, but I liked the name. I would say a lot of people garden the way that Jackson Pollock paints, and that's just throwing stuff out there until it looks full enough, and then yeah, you're good with it. No, that's not good. What I want to talk about is how to mass things together, how to create. So you can see that there's 5 different colors in here, and this design is not, it doesn't really do anything. It's just all the same size. It's just kind of, there's no real pattern. There's just nothing but chaos. Whereas in a massed garden, you have larger sections of things. So you use a lot of the same plant, and you still have 5 different components here, but they're set up in a way so that you have, line and contour, and you've got repetition, and it doesn't look so, you're just throwing plants until it looks full enough. So I'll use the material that I used for that garden, and I'll show you both a pointillism type garden and a massed garden. Okay, so here are my 5 items here: sage, creosote bush, then the blackthorn, the fountain bamboo, and the manzanita. So a pointillism garden looks like this. Okay, this is what I see a lot. This This works in kind of a meadow setting, I would guess, but normally people find plants that they like and they just use them as if they're architecture pieces. So they like find something like the crowberry because it's nice and green and it's easy to use, spam that like crazy, then maybe add some bracken, call it a day. This is it's not pleasant to look at it. It looks like it's completely, like it's a garden that has completely gone, back to nature, that nobody's taking care of this right now. Looks like there is absolutely no thought on how it should go together. And frankly, this kind of garden is not necessarily bad if you're trying to create a wild, kind of untamed area. But if you are actually trying to create a landscaped area or a designed area, then this is not the way to go. So I'll show you what a masked garden looks like. I'm going to start with some of the largest material that I've got. It's the manzanita, and I'm going to create a focal point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it a little bit, I'm going to sink it a little bit, and I'm going to do that again. And I'm creating a mass of this manzanita instead of one single little thing. And then I might repeat that again with a little bit more of the red showing on this side. There we go. Good start already. Then I'm going to take the fountain bamboo and I'm going to use that as a back screen. And I'm going to mass and then turn and drop and turn and raise and turn and way drop. And I'm going to get at peep level and I'm going to look at what I've just done. And then I'm going to raise it and lower it. So I basically created a green screen. So that is the back side of this particular garden. There's nothing else that's going to be behind there, unless it's a larger tree or something like that. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to start fiddling, because that is important in getting a masked look. So I want that to be a little taller. Yeah, let's see a little bit of the stems showing. Okay, I like that. Then let's take the blackthorn. Blackthorn bush is really cool because it has a very light and airy texture. And so what I can do is just very simply mask that in, creating clumps of odd numbers. Yeah, I think that's good enough. And then I'm going to take the creosote, which I see as a yellow flowered shrub called a potentilla. I don't see creosote here, so I'm just going to use it as I see it. And I'm going to mask this in the front. Big mass there. Maybe repeat that pattern over here. And then finish off over here. And then all that's left is the sage. And again, just sort of massing it together. You can leave negative space, it's not necessarily going to be a problem. In fact, and then this is what I typically do, is I start removing material because I've added too much. This is what people do in gardens too. In the first year, they'll mass plants together, knowing that next year they're probably going to be too many there, and they're going to start pulling plants away. So, let's see, add some of the soil back. And then the other thing that usually helps these gardens, and it's not evident here, but it's evident where my example garden is you just want to raise the land. Yeah, you just want to have a little bit of that, the land going up so that it kind of closes off the whole view. And so that's what a masked garden looks like. It's very clean components, and then you can kind of mix and match things. So in the case of the garden that I showed you, had little ground covers on to kind of complete the look. But it's a big jump between the two. But there you go. There's the pointillism garden as opposed to the masked garden. All right, here we are a little bit further And I've got so I've pretty much completed this garden now, so we can focus on this garden, which is the main component. And I've got some more shrubs in. This is really cool. This is something, I cannot remember who found this particular thing, but if you put wisteria upside down, just the way that the light hits it and the way that the textures are, looks an awful lot like lupin. And so it's really good if you're looking for another perennial flower that we don't necessarily have. Turn the wisteria upside down. And in general, turn plants upside down and see if they look good, because a lot of these discoveries are just manipulating the plants in such a way, the way that the textures or the lighting engine works. Sometimes they can look completely different to where they look when they're facing up. To that note, here you go again. Here is another form of massing. And, do we have this item in game? Yes, we do. It's the cypress tree, and it's on its side. You kind of feather that in together. It looks like a juniper. It looks like any sort of horizontal type shrub that would definitely be on the front here. In addition, if you didn't see it in the garden rescue video, I think it's the most recent one, the one of the tropical house, I learned how to do clematis, it's clematis, I gotta say it right. And it's basically just arrowwoods and sea hollies put together. And it looks really, effective. Super, super effective. And then the actual trunk is just the African branches and the African air plant. And because this is a less maintained sort of garden, I wanted to make sure that it didn't, it wasn't covered in flowers necessarily. So there is one that's in bloom, one clematis, and then the rest are not in bloom. They're just green, and they're covering up the arbor in certain areas. But it's not, it's not a lot. And I wanted to make sure that this is definitely more of an established garden. Has not really been touched in a while. Probably every so often they have to replace the lupins. But that's about it. Ooh, we're getting really close now. So I had the opportunity to get some of these fences from Pond Shrimp. If you don't know her, she's the one that's doing Little Eden right now, an incredible zoo that you should absolutely go check out. And she had these willow fences as part of her Skytrail redo. And I thought they were incredibly cool, so I asked if I could have them, and she obliged, and so now they're in here. And I think they give a really awesome look. Again, with the simplicity of pieces, these are just climbing logs, all woven together. Seeing items for, not necessarily what they are, but what they could be, is the name of the game in trying to create these really cool custom environments. And then in here I've got the first kind of little wedge type, or the little pocket garden. So you've got all of these little wildflowers in here, very loose sprays of stuff, some bracken, some of the lupins, and this looks pretty cool, but what is it? Well, it's one of those desert bushes that have been way sunk. And then in here I also wanted to show the passage of time, so I put in some of this Himalayan birch, which is meant to look like a birch that's been forgotten, that may be in the process of being diseased, or it could have had an insect attack or something like that. I wanted to show that there is progression, and so this tree may not be here in 5 years, so it looks a little worse for wear, and I kind of like that. Also wanted to illustrate this idea of giving people a destination. So I've talked about giving people a destination that they can actually get to, but you can also do this with a sort of optical illusion. You can make it seem as if somebody can walk up there and that there's something to look at. It gives the garden a feeling of grandeur. It makes it feel like it's bigger than it actually is. It's kind of like when people put mirrors in a room until you actually walk into the room looks like twice as big. The same kind of concept here. You've got this little log path, and then if you were to actually walk up, you would notice that, there's actually nothing to see. So it's this idea that there's something beyond until you actually walk up to it and it breaks the illusion. So stay on the paths. Don't be going places you shouldn't be going. And then you'll notice the palette is very, very naturalistic. I wanted it to feel like things grew there. They have not really taken care of it. They pull, really obnoxious weeds out of there. But for the most part, anything that is growing, anything that's taking over, ivies, grasses, stuff like that, I wanted it to look like it is just there and they're not really managing it at all. Because when you think about how large one of these botanical gardens are, there are going to be areas that are just very unkept, and they are lightly taken care of, but you wouldn't necessarily want to pull like ground covers out because they are actually suppressing weeds. So the more that you have an established garden set up, the less work you have to do overall. The tree material is very simple too. You got ponderosas in each one of the little bubbles here. And then I've got marula trees, and I know they're probably tropical or something like that, but they look really good. Nice open structure, really nice leaves. And then I've got marulas buried as shrubs because they do have that kind of medium green. Woo. And then I've got more of the creosote bushes because why not? Why wouldn't they, work their way over here? And this was a really cool find too, is that sometimes you see a plant in there like, I'm never going to use that. Well, to me, that was the mangrove. When am I ever going to use the mangrove? It looks terrible. It looks good for what it is, but we don't have a coastal environment. Mangroves, this is all that is growing into the ocean at that point. And then also maybe for swamps or something like that. But just isolate away, and you start to see that this is a really useful and awesome plant because it is that kind of spring light green, and no other plant in this game has this coloring. So if you can manage to hide away all of the things that make it weird and kind of unsightly, what it becomes is all of the understory plants in a forest garden or something like that have that really light spring green. Nothing about it looks tropical anymore. So in context, this is one of my favorite new plants because it has something that no other plant has. I've even found a use for probably the ugliest plant in Planet Zoo. Sorry, this is a different game. This is the alpine currant. An attempt was made, but it doesn't look anything like alpine currant. Yeah, it is. I wonder if this was just early in the process and they hadn't quite figured out how to do some good-looking plants, but I can tell from this model that it's bad. It's, no. So, you kind of throw it away. You think, what am I ever going to use it for? Well, I had the option, or I had the idea to turn it upside down because I realized it has a really cool leaf. In a leaf shape that we don't really have anywhere in any of the other plants. And as I turned it upside down, I realized, take a step back a little bit. Oh, hey, that looks like something that can actually be usable. Because it is a kind of dark green, glossy leaf. It has a shape that you don't really see in the garden at all. And you get rid of that weird ratty top, and suddenly it becomes a usable plant again. So that's what I have here. Right there. The other thing that a lot of you probably have wondered, what the hell am I going to use this for? Carpet moss. When I first saw this, I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. Well, as you start to bury it and put it around rocks and stuff like that, it becomes a really satisfying, like Scotch moss or Irish moss ground cover. So it can really help you, especially if you are doing something where you want to have some green underneath, but you don't necessarily want to change the texture of the soil. That's a good place to use this particular plant. So all that said, I would stress that you don't simply write certain scenery items off when you're playing this game or any of the Planet series games. The most important piece in the early Planet Coaster was the snowman pipe because it was small and it was black and we could turn it into a bunch of different things. Later it became well, when we got TMTK, then beams became like the #1 used item because we used them for literally everything. But there are uses for everything, and if you can just kind of separate them, what they actually are. So in this case, this is a Sudanese frankincense tree. Well, the way that I see it, as I remove the bottom and stuff like that and sink all that in, that looks an awful lot like, I don't know, it looks a little bit like willow or something like that. Not weeping willow, but, bush willow. And that's another interesting green, another interesting texture that I wouldn't necessarily have if I only saw this as a Sudanese frankincense tree. Because then that certainly would not fit in this garden at all. But this does. And here we are at the end. It's been a wonderful journey. This garden came together really fast. I have enjoyed every moment of it. Whereas, let's just say, this garden gave me some issues. And at times I felt like, I don't know if I can continue this. I don't know if I can do this all the way. This garden was just like, oh, this is getting better and better and better and better. So hopefully that gave you a better look at, the way that this garden is laid out and how it feels and how it sounds and how it looks when you kind of walk through it. The other thing that I got done is this. It's just, boom, there it is. So, like I said, like I talked about, here is the ADA ramp. So if you want to see this walkthrough garden here, you certainly can. There is a steady slope all the way up to here, all the way up to here. But if you want to, avoid that and just go to the estate, well, that was a bit of a problem because there was no way to get down in a safe way. So I created the original staircase that the estate kind of came with, and then a modified part of the estate here with this ramp. And so you have this weird dichotomy between the two. You've got this old kind of tropical style when California was in a place where the climate was beautiful, water was plenty, you could create that kind of tropical environment. And then you have the new edition, and it's all dryscape. It's all trees that can handle drought. It's all grasses and stuff like that. So in that single view, you've got the old and the new. And in the new, you also have this awesome ADA accessible ramp. Starts off at the top here and works its way down. And then you have a handrail that comes all the way to the base. And from here, I need to figure out how to get people down into the migration garden. Haven't quite figured that out yet. Don't at me. Don't at me, bro. And then here was the last little detail that I really liked. These are supposed to be live oaks, which are fairly old. They should have, lived with the estate, but it's very possible that one has died, and so one has died. I ended up taking up all the old foliage and stuff like that, and so what has happened in the absence of this tree is that everything else, especially this new eucalyptus, has had a chance to start getting established. And so you have this little circle of life thing happening here. I feel like it's a very Californian thing. You wouldn't necessarily replace the tree immediately. Probably all these live oaks are going to die at some point, and then they'll get replaced. Could also be too that they are a protected tree species in California, and so the estate itself could not do any removals until they are in decline. And so these ones are not in decline. This one was, and so it has been destroyed. And then you might be wondering why I didn't landscape the other side of the ramp here. You can see that it's fairly open. It only has a curb, and then it has the handrail. Mostly because I didn't want to. I didn't want to obstruct any more views. Like when you're down here, you can still see the ramp and everything. I didn't want it to feel as built up. I just wanted it to be, throw in some shrubs for erosion control and some of this grass here, and a lot more naturalistic of an approach to this garden. And what I really, really, really love about this garden is that the kind of the same thing that happened in the water garden, where you have these pokes of the tropical foliage kind of showing through. So you still have a bit of a frame of reference. So you can see it, you can see the palms in there. It's just very, very California. And then in here, you can start to see the palms show up as you get to the end of the trail garden. And so you have these themes, 3 distinct themes sitting right next to one another. And you can see it here in the old landscaping. You've got these, I just kind of sunk some Joshua trees in there because I really like the shape that it makes. But you can see that you have this old school California type landscape here that has been, it's a little old, it's a little dated and stuff like that. But then immediately as you walk in, it all starts to drift away, and then you're in this beautiful forest meadow. And I like the closeness between all of the different styles. I mean, if you look above, you can see that you've got the old estate and the old gardens, which we haven't quite fully fleshed out yet. This will all be, garden beds and stuff like that. And then you have the way new and the way modern, and from your view, you can't even tell. You see that blue thing up there, but if I remove it and show you just a little bit, you can see that that's in a completely different style too. That's in a Spanish revival, I think. So put that back up. So since this is a garden, it should have some person to dedicate it to, and the person that I could only think of when I was building this garden had to have been Pond Shrimp, because this is exactly her MO. She went crazy when she realized that we could do lupins from wisteria. She just loves this wildflower look, and so I have to call this the... I don't even know what the name is. Like, I don't have a sign for it yet, because I'm still hoping that we get more signs in the future that are a little bit smaller. But I think it's called the Ponderosa Trail or something like that, in honor of Pond Shrimp. It's corny, I know. We'll figure out a sign for it though. So I think that's where we're gonna leave it today. If you liked what you saw, you know what to do. Next episode is going to be the beginning of the desert garden. It's going to be a few parts, and it is the first garden that's going to receive an animal, which is going to be really awesome. So if I just get out of this loveliness, bye. Bye, beautiful garden. All right, and move up here. Don't look at that. You didn't see that. It's a garden that is on many, many levels. Many different terrain shifts. And it's going to be one of the oldest gardens in the whole estate. And you can see that, they would actually have been able to see it from there. It's going to be a garden that has its own sort of like research center and stuff like that, where they're researching different species and like trying to hybridize new varieties and stuff like that. And I think it's going to be the first place that we have an animal, and I think it's going to be one of the tortoises. I can't remember if it's going to be the Galapagos or the other one, which I cannot remember what it's called. But I'm really looking forward to it. Duct Tape Forum's already sent some pictures. I'm amazed. I don't expect him to do a whole lot of this. I assume that this is going to be a 3-parter at least. We may do 2 parts in one series and then take a break and then do another part to finish up. But it's a big garden, and it is yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm also kind of dreading it because it's big. It's big and it's got a lot of terrain. So I really hope to see you for the next one, and until next time, see you later, guys. Bye.